Welcome, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Toxic Mold Sucks podcast presented by Malachi's Message Foundation. My name is Miriam Khalili, and I'm joined by my co-host, Emily Rachel.
Thanks, Miriam. I'm excited to welcome today's guest, Brian Wright, the owner of Crossway Mechanical LLC, that's located out in Tomball, Texas. Brian has been in the residential side of the HVAC industry for 28 years and specializes in the retrofit replacement markets. He is certified in many things. He is NATE certified technician. He is certified NCI member. He is also BPI certified in blower door testing. In addition, he is an expert on carbon monoxide and combustion analysis, duct system optimization, and is a residential HVAC system performance specialist. Hi, Brian, and welcome so much to today's podcast.
Hi, thank y'all for having me. Looking excited about this opportunity to join y'all's podcast.
Brian, we're so happy that you're here, and we have an opportunity to have an HVAC expert here on the Toxic Mold Sucks podcast. And not just that, but you're somebody that understands mold. And so if you don't mind, can you tell us why you got into the mold space? Did you have a personal encounter with mold that impacted you or your family? Or is this just something you found yourself becoming passionate about after your 28 years of helping homeowners navigate the lungs of their home?
Yeah, great question. So I found myself connecting with the mold community about 5 years ago. I had a client and that had some major challenges with their home. And she had reached out, found me through, I think a mold inspector or a building science guy. And so they brought me out to this house, and she had kind of laid out all this stuff these challenges that she had with her house. And I mean, when I went there, one of her houses was gutted. The other one was a brand new house that was built, but had a lot of mold in it. And I didn't even understand anything about the mold, but I understood the HVAC side of it. And I started looking at, I was brought up there to look at design and application. And with some of the credentials that I had and being in the business, she could not find anybody to take on the challenge of helping her rebuild and getting this stuff right. So, and I was willing to do that. I had to learn. I never had a mold encounter, me or my family. At that time, I wasn't aware about it. I mean, I look back now and thinking some of the allergies that my daughter's been on medicine with Allegra when she was born, since she was born for a long time dealing with allergies. My wife had asthma. So maybe at one of the homes that we had at one time might have had mold and we just weren't aware of it, right? But looking back now, what I've learned over the years, I'm thinking that there could have been some connections due to being exposed to mold, right? But that lady that I was able to help out and I learned a lot from her. And her and her daughter they studied a lot about it. They were on so much medication. They had been misdiagnosed from stuff. So us through that journey of helping them getting their house rebuilt, both systems, and getting the house back to being healthy, it's kind of made me desire to have a change in the direction I was headed. I really enjoyed that part of it. It was very challenging. And in our industry, the HVAC industry is known to get in, get your job done, and collect on the job and move on, right? And these jobs they're laid out a lot longer. You have a process, you have testing that needs to be done, and so redesigning, having manual J's and stuff. So I really liked all the science that went behind it. And so after that project, and it went well, and I started just making connections with mold inspectors, and she knew a lot of people in the community. She had connected me with like PJ Harlow, and Certified Mold Assessment out of Florida was the company that she was using for testing. And when they had come back to look at the house after all the mechanical was done, that mold inspector said, "Hey, I want to meet this mechanical contractor that you have. I've never seen mechanical work with integrity like this and how it was designed." And then that's kind of opened the door for me, meeting those people, and then started to realize like what was all involved in, in dealing with mold and people that had sensitivities and stuff. So
That's awesome. I can see how that would have been just sort of a tidal wave opening into the mold space, because it is such a unique thing for an HVAC contractor to have an interest in that and care to do the job right the first time.
That's really incredible, because most HVAC contractors, from my experience, just like you mentioned, they're kind of just in and out. They don't want to understand the true science behind it all to fix the problem, and so it doesn't come back.
yeah, and that's exactly why, like, finding a contractor or finding somebody that takes the time to do the manual J's, to do the manual S's, to do the manual D's was so important. And I've always been a big believer in those things. Part of the training that I've done, I've been with NCI 8 years now, National Comfort Institute. And I got a lot of like my credentials from them on duct optimization, air balancing, and started really understanding the science of airflow. And then it opened up to learning, working with building science guys, and then started learning about the envelope of the home. And so it just evolved from there. But I think that, it's so important for people to understand that every home is different, right? And one of the lines that in National Comfort Institute always uses that if you're not measuring, you're just guessing. And and others say, well, you're just somebody with an opinion, right? And so that's what led me to start collecting data, testing. And when I met with that certified mold that inspector out of Florida that was hired in to help with this house, when I met, he wanted to meet and have dinner and kind of introduce himself. And he did a lot of work in the Austin, Dallas area. He said, I took the information that I had when I captured all the data, like how it wasn't installed properly, and I tested in. But then once we did our work, I had all the data to prove how I had everything functioning accordingly properly, with everything was set up with airflow, just, with the dehumidifier, with the ERVs, and then how we had the house on a positive note, just driving out moisture. But he said he had worked in like 40 states and been traveling all over doing mold work, and had never seen just work that like what we have done, and then providing all that information. He said like that's a golden ticket for you to be helping our industry. Like, we need more guys like you. We need more companies that have that mindset. And he's like, it was like a diamond in the rough. And then from just networking from them, I would say the last 4 years of my life now, and working with like Morgan with R&R remediation, and them just other mold consultants, like 95% of my business now is dealing with the mold community, and it's all been word of mouth. I don't do any marketing or advertising about what I do. It's just, just how I tell people it's just what God has done for us, so it's my calling right now.
How does the high performance HVAC contracting specifically address the mold challenges we're facing in residential homes?
So I feel like high performance contracting is, people that are doing what we're doing, they're measuring, right? They have an understanding. Every home is different. So we have to know what that house is doing, not doing. We look at attic ventilation. We look at exhaust, how, kitchen exhaust, restroom exhaust, laundry rooms. So we have to know how the house is designed, and then we look at the HVAC system. And so I feel like high performance contracting and what we do and what we bring to the table for the mold community is everything's measured, and we're not guessing at anything. It evolves, and every house is different, but I tell people, like, you get me with the project, like I will figure out. I don't know everything, but I know a lot of people and I have a lot of connections. And so I'll bounce things off of people. I get information from others, and we figure out things. I mean, there's some really good remediation companies in the Houston area that I've worked with that I've learned a lot from as well. Building science guys that I've been on projects with. And so you have to understand how the house works, and you have to look at the house as not just focus on the HVAC, but look at the whole home as a system. And that's what I've taken my focus on, and that's really helped me understand. And I learn every day. And I'm very thankful for the opportunity because um, people so into me. Just driving today back to the office, I had a remediation guy that I do work with just give me some data on dehumidifiers that we've been collecting on some homes on how we're setting them up, and we're testing them with capturing some weather data information and things that we can do to improve the installation of dehumidifiers, right? And so we make changes, we bounce things off of each other, but I'm learning, and we're helping each other out, and that's what I like about this community.
I love that. So I would love if you can tell us some of the things you do to help us understand what it is that you do when you're going into a house and you're doing an inspection to kind of figure out what's the problem here. So what does that look like when you show up at a house for the first time and you start that process?
So what I do is I normally kind of I do a full evaluation room by room, kind of get an idea looking at placements of return air grills, supply air grills. I'm getting data off of the kitchen exhaust hood. I'm getting information off of the restroom exhaust, laundry room exhaust. So we're doing a lot of collecting data, models, serial numbers. We're doing just making sure the systems are matched, what kind of thermostats they have, placement of thermostats. So I have a full evaluation list that I go through, and I basically tell the homeowners my start is collecting all that information, get an idea, and then I make my way into starting deploying my instruments and capturing data, performance data. I look at ACA, is the Air Conditioning Contractor Association. They actually have guidelines for installation practices, and I look at a lot of that information, and I have a checklist that I look for to make sure that things that meet ACA standards, meet code, and look for deficiencies and go from there. So that's what I do a lot of.
Brian, with all of your experience, what are you finding to be kind of the root cause in most of the homes that you go into that's creating moisture within the HVAC system that's allowing an environment for mold to grow?
Yeah, so I find a lot of the things that I find a lot of are deficiencies. So the manufacturers, when you have they have a blower data chart, right, on how the furnaces should be set up. We should know the pressure drop of the coils. And I know I'm getting technical, but I use a lot of that data, and there's parameters where the system should be operating in. And I tell people it's no different than when you go to the doctor's office and you get your blood pressure taken. It's the first thing when you walk into a doctor's, they take your temperature, your weight, and your blood pressure, right? Well, those are kind of some of the similar things that I capture on the system, and I know my parameters. And so what I find a lot of is a lot of it is application challenges, right? Sometimes it's oversized. When we start really getting into it, we'll do a manual J, and sometimes we'll find out, like, if the builder had a manual J done and they had their system, I find like a builder might have a generic manual J because they're going to build this house. They're going to probably build 15 or 20 of these houses in this little area. But when the orientation changes, it changes the load of that, right? So I've seen when I've gotten the manual J's and I'm starting to go through them, and I'll look, and the house was supposed to face northeast, and like front door was supposed to face north, but this one's facing south, right? So it changes the windows and stuff like that. So there's a lot to look at, but a lot of the stuff that I find in working with remediation, the HVAC is either oversized or poor duct design, airflow challenges that create these issues, and with homes and mold and supply plenums. Everyone thinks, well, we live in Houston or we live in Texas, we're going to have high heat, attics are going to be hot. Condensation is a normal thing. A little bit of organic growth or mold on the plenum or the furnace, that's normal, and it's not normal, and I tell people, if the most important thing, because I have case studies and all the jobs that we do, we don't have units that sweat or condense in the attic. And the reason why I tell people that, it's not because I do some, I understand airflow and I understand you have to get the air moving through the system correctly. If you get it moving through the attic, I mean, through the system, and your system's in the attic, if you get it moving through there correctly, it doesn't have time to absorb heat, right? And so it's no different than taking a Coke can outside and, if it's going to hit dew point and it's going to condense and sweat. Well, ductwork will do the same thing. If that air stays stagnant or you have too big of a duct and the air can't, have the velocity to go through it, the air is going to move slower through that ductwork and it's going to hit dew point and it's going to start sweating. And so I find a lot of those challenges, and I think it's lack of training on builders. I think that there's not a lot of quality control, and there's not a lot of enough people to go out and do like a thorough inspection when they sell a home or are verifying that system is set up properly.
Can I ask you a question? Do you mind to explain what a manual J is for anybody that's listening that doesn't know that terminology and what that means when you say that you're going to do a manual J?
Yes. So a manual J is a manual J is a calculation on a house within a 24-hour span. And so the manual J part of it is to do it's a calculation based on orientation, the roof, windows, type of windows, insulation, R value, and it basically calculates the BTUs for heating and cooling of a home in a 24-hour span, right? So once you get the manual J set, then they have the manual S. And manual S is selecting the right system that fits into that manual J for cooling and heating capacities. And then once you select that system, then you are able to do your manual D. And the manual D is the duct design, and that's getting the airflow design, the airflow to each room with a certain number, knowing if it's, how much CFM the master bedroom needs and how much return does it need and stuff like that. So those three are the three key things that I tell homeowners all the time. Like when I'm involved in a project, like we start from there. We have to have a baseline. We have to have understanding. And a lot of times when I get involved, like homeowners have already replaced their system 2 or 3 years ago. They got a brand new system by this contractor, but he went off of asking them questions like, well, how did the other one work? Oh, this room was hot. Well, guess what? We're just going to go from a 4-ton to a 5-ton without understanding why it's hot. Now they've just created a problem, right? And then normally when we're doing our forensics or looking into it, well, this was the root cause of why you started having mold. A bigger system, short cycle didn't run long enough, and now you have high humidity, and it starts from there. And we see it a lot. We see that happen quite often.
I get this question a lot, so I hope you can answer it for those wanting to know. Should their HVAC system be set to auto or on?
So that's on the fan cycle, it should always be set to auto. Yeah, because when you leave the fan on the on position, once the system shuts down, you have the evaporator coil is always where the condensing takes place. It's always a cold, dark, wet place, I tell people. And so when you leave the fan running afterwards, now you're blowing moisture back into the home instead of allowing that moisture to run down the coil and out the drain pan into the plumbing. And so a lot of people think, well, I'm just gonna circulate air in my house and I'll leave the fan on. Well, now you're just dumping more humidity, more moisture back into the home. And when that happens, a lot of times it's too late. Like it doesn't take long in our climate, in our region, to start having organic growth. I mean, you get dust, carpet, whatever you have, different things, now you've got organic growth happening.
We hear a lot of tenants and homeowners being blamed for, causing the moisture problems because of that very thing, leaving it in the on position versus the auto. So thank you for going over that.
Yeah, and it's not uncommon that people people just think that it's no different than having a ceiling fan. I'm just gonna have the air circulating just in my home, but they don't realize that in our region, in our area, it's not a good thing to do. With a lot of the people that have like UV lights or air purifiers and stuff, they want to run it all the time on the fan on so that they're constantly purifying their home or cleaning their air in their home. But there's thermostats that allow you to do like circulation mode, or where you can set it on a timer to come on every 15 minutes, 15 minutes on the hour or whatever, just to help, you know, clean the air up, but not to leave it on 24/7 or, you know, hours at a time. That's not healthy for a home in our area.
That's great to know. I'm curious, you were describing this process with manual J's and so on. And, you know, one of the things I actually encountered in my home was we found out that the builder had been running tests with the media filter out of the system to get a certain level of clearance. So can you talk about those types of things that might happen and what that does to a system if you take the media filter out to get your clearance testing for it operating correctly?
Yeah, so when you're capturing data like resistance through, whether it's through a filter grill, through a media filter, through evaporator coil, through supply ducts, or through grills, there's a process on how to do it. And you want to test always, as you know, with the media filter in. You don't ever want to take it out, because it will lower the resistance. Sometimes those pressure drops, you know, a lot of times, and it depends on how it's designed, right? Like when we're working with clients that have mold, they're victims of mold, or they have sensitivities. I love to double filter things, right? Well, our industry is real big about, you know, oh, double filtering is bad. But if you design a system and you design the airflow, and you can double filter all day long and get the air moving correctly. But on a new construction build, they don't design for that. And a lot of times they want, and the deficiencies in how the ductwork's installed, the kinks, the bends, the hard radiuses, how they support it. You know, they tighten the strap too tight, right? And it creates, you know, pinches off the ductwork. And there's different things. You want to test the system as it is. You don't want to ever just take out the filter, because it's not going to give you true readings when you have a filter in there. And it might be also, I see a lot of times where homeowners will say, well, I ordered a MERV 13 or a MERV 16 filter. Well, you can't just start going to a tighter pleated filter, a better filtration, not knowing whether your system could handle it or not. And I see that a lot of times when I start going to these homes. They'll realize, like, they didn't realize, they just thought, hey, I have a Honeywell or April Air product, and I just want to get the best filter that I can get for that, and not knowing that they're actually causing more harm to the system and causing it to have to work harder. And I tell them there's a proper way to do that and design it, but you just have to know what your system's capabilities are. And that's why it's so important. Like when I tell homeowners, you know, find a contractor that does a manual J, manual S, manual D. They're not cheap. I mean, but if anybody comes in that doesn't provide that data, they're just selling you something, right? And I tell people, I'm not a salesman, I'm a solution guy, right? But I'm going to provide the data to back everything up that I'm doing. And I test in, I test out, and I have performance data that shows how the new systems are working. And now it's up to the homeowners from there to do, you know, proper maintenance and, you know, and keeping it serviced and maintained.
Thanks for touching on that. That is something that's always bothered me since I had my initial inspection on my house, and we were trying to figure out, well, why is the builder saying that this passed? And then it kept failing our third-party inspections. And so I think that's something a lot of homeowners need to know, and something they need to ask. And then also, I love that you touched on, you know, upgrading your system with a better, fancier filter, because everybody thinks, oh, I just need to go and put that, you know, that MERV 16 into my system. My doctor said I need more filtration in my house. You don't want to just go out and do that. So thank you for explaining why that is not the best scenario unless you have that data. That is really helpful.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, and I know how so many people, you know, in one thing that I've learned about the mold community and everything, when I get a call, it's urgent, right? They're panicking. They're just finding out whether they're having sicknesses, illnesses, complications, whatever the case may be, or they can actually see the growth in their house, and they've maybe had an inspector out, and the process of going through what we do, it's not a very fast process, right? It takes, I have a third-party company that I work really well with that does all of our manual J's and S's. And people always ask me, well, how come you don't do it? I mean, this HVAC company does it. They have to do a proper manual J. It takes, I would say 16 hours, 12 to 16 hours, depending on the size of the house and how many systems. But it is a very time-consuming job to do it right, you know? And so I tell people all the time, like, I don't have that kind of time. There's people that specialize in it, but when we start the process, that might take 7 to 10 days for them to do it. It takes me, from the time I get booked to go out there, I might be that time frame. Sometimes 2 weeks booked out before I can get to them, and then it takes me another 7 to 10 days to get their report to them, and going through all the photos and the data that I collect. So I tell people, like, you know, don't panic, you know, because it's always urgent, right? They need it done tomorrow. They want everything done. And I think that there's a time frame that people need to just kind of take a step back, relax, find the right team, find the right people, make the connections, and then start working from there. Because if you've already been living in it for however many years and you're fine, well, the good thing is now you found out, now you know what needs to be done, but don't rush into anything. Because I've seen so many people that do that, and then the next thing I know, they're right back in the situation because they just found somebody that just took their money from them and not really have an understanding or provide data. You know, just somebody came in, oh yeah, we can take care of this. You know, we're fully mold remediation. We can take care of the HVAC. And then 4 or 5 months later, they're still in the same situation, you know?
I'm really glad you're mentioning this because this is a big problem that I see in our industry. People are given false hope by companies that say, oh, we can just come in and we can spray our solution and it'll take care of all the mold, but they're not understanding, they're not finding the root cause of the moisture that allow that mold to grow. So can you kind of go talk a little bit about that and why that's not what people need to do? Because I mean, it's usually a couple $1,000s for, you know, this magical product to go into the ducts and everything and supposedly be, you know, the fix, when it's really not, because they end up having mold grow again. But not only that, they're not removing any of the mold, they're potentially just killing it, which can still be a huge problem to somebody's indoor air quality.
Yes, we see that quite often. There's a lot of gimmicky stuff out there. There's a lot of fast, smooth talkers, and I tell customers, like, they'll call me like, well, I just talked to so and so, and they can line the plenum, they can, you know, spray this coating and cover it, right? And I mean, I tell people, like, I've worked closely with a lot of people that are professionals in this business, and I personally have taken out ductwork that was, we had a home that brand new system was put in, like within like a couple of months, 2 or 3 months, and then they had testing, everything came back like they had it swabbed. And so we actually tried to help the homeowners. We took pieces of ductwork out, stretched it out, tried to see if we could spray, like fog it, do Decon 30, I mean, other products that we tried, you know, and a 25-foot run of ductwork. And then we had it swabbed just to see, like, is there any way that we can help with the cotton, you know, and the only way to really get rid of it was to replace it all, right? We were just doing testing. I was talking to a guy out of Florida who was like a really well-known professional duct cleaning company. And, you know, he was like, with Flex Duct, it's almost impossible. He said, every the time you try to take it out, clean it, disinfect and all, he said, it's just best to replace it. You know, if it was sheet metal ductwork where you can have somebody come in and whip it or clean it or vacuum it, like, that's a different story. But our market and most of there's very little hard pipe ductwork being put in anymore. It's because of the cost and it's just hard to find people that know how to install it. But with our market, I tell people, like, you know, you can spray, you can maybe temporarily cover it, but I promise you in a few months, it's going to expose itself again, and you're not actually going to the root cause of fixing how it started from there, right? I tell people, like, we have to have an understanding of how this happened, right? Like, is it oversized? Is it not sized correctly? I've seen it where because of the resistance, the blower motor was set up too high, and it actually will push water off of the evaporator cool into the supply plenum. And I mean, I've posted some pictures just recently of some supply plenums and I'm not one to really put on social media like stuff like that. One is because I know like I don't have the manpower to go and start really, I stay busy with word of mouth stuff. But just from a couple of posts that I did last week, I can't tell you, I know for sure I got 4 phone calls from different areas asking questions about it, saying I feel like ours looks like that, and it has to be removed. I tell them like you cannot clean it, you can't pull out the insulation. It's in the airstream. And so, and I've learned, and I've been working with people, and maybe one day someone will come up with something that will combat that, and you can spray it and save some money. But I haven't, the short time that I've been in it and the people that I've networked with and worked with, we haven't found anything that we could say really works or has been tested and proven.
I want to add on to that just to say, a lot of people that have multiple chemical sensitivity or SIRS, people that are already impacted by mold and maybe they don't know that's why they're having these health issues, putting those types of chemicals in there, one, you're going to have a reaction to the chemical more than likely. And then two, if you do have a mycotoxin producing mold that is living in that flex ducting, you're just going to make it angry and you're going to have an even bigger problem on your hand. And so it is kind of infuriating knowing this and seeing just how often it is recommended to do flex duct cleaning for microbial growth. And people don't understand the dangers involved with aggravating the growth as well as what can happen to you and your family. And I've just talked to several people here recently who had brand new systems put in, one person in particular 2 years ago by an AC contractor. It's only 2 years old and it's covered with mold. And that same contractor came back and said, I'm going to clean it. And they sprayed it and poor family got extremely sick. And one member had to sleep outside for, I think, 2 weeks, she said, because she could not handle the contamination level in her home. And so it is just so important to find somebody like you that really does understand mold and how it can impact somebody's health. And it's not, cleaning is just not always the best answer to go after for this type of issue.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like I've learned a lot about it, and I'm still learning. But some people say, "Oh, there's not enough science or data to back up that it's mold related and their illnesses." But I see it every day. I meet with clients on a daily basis who are struggling. Their kids are struggling, and from having not being able to walk, lost their ability to walk as a teenager, all of a sudden got sick, and then found out they had allergic reaction to a mycotoxin that their body couldn't fight off. From teeth rotten out of a young man's mouth just because of his body was a micro. So I tell people it's really hard, to when they have other siblings in the house that are fine, and then that that nothing's wrong with them, but this one of the kids is having major health issues by it, and they did all the blood work and had him come back, and it was mycotoxins, and it was his body couldn't fight it off, and his teeth were rotten out of his mouth, painfully rotten out of his mouth. So I tell people like, you can sit here and say that, oh, it could be something else, or there's not enough science to back it up, but I see it, I live it every day. And I see people, I hear testimonies, I hear people's, the side effects from mold, what it's caused them in their bodies, and what it's done to their digestive system, or to their brain fog and not being able to think, and it's just like seeing well-accomplished people can't even remember how to complete a sentence, because of mold toxicity.
Brian, I do have a question, just so people can kind of understand. Were you ever educated or trained on mold through any of your certifications or classes that you had to take? And if so, or if not, why do you think that is? Why are they not kind of covering this for individuals like you who should know about it, so that way you can provide the solutions and make sure it doesn't continue on?
Yeah, that's a great question. Our industry focuses on moving boxes. A lot of the training, from the manufacturers is the latest and greatest new system out here. It's very high efficiency, SEER rating, and that's always the push, right? It's our training is how to work on that system, how to sell it, and how to move boxes, right? The manufacturers want you to move equipment, and it benefits them. I mean, it's, that's what they want. When I started really understanding the science of everything, our salesman also reached out to me and said, "Hey, I noticed you're not selling a lot of equipment, but you're buying a lot of ductwork, and you're doing, I was buying sheet metal and everything." And I said, "Man, I found a niche where I'm fixing everybody else's problems and helping get homes healthy." But I don't think that our industry is not educated on mold. And when they see that, or they feel like it's in the attic or it's on the system, they just attribute it to, it's a ventilation issue. It's not an AC issue. It's the hot attics. It's, we got a cold AC in the attic, and it's going to happen, right? But they don't understand the science and why it's happening. And I find myself, even talking to builders, talking to HVAC contractors who are the new construction guys on their team. We're finding out, like, they're not educated on, like, they're taught to go out there and put the system in, but they don't have. What I like about the manufacturers is they have installation instructions in their packets that they leave, and they actually have a lot of data. All the stuff that I capture when I'm out there, it's actually, they have a startup list in those installation instructions. But when we go to every home I ever go to, those are left in the attic on top of the furnace or underneath the furnace, or they're stapled or nailed to a 2x4 in the attic. But I open them up and I'm like, here's a startup sheet. If this company would have done this and fully filled out the gas pressure and the static pressure, and maybe they might have known that this thing's not set up right and not working correctly. Right. But if you're not doing it, then you don't know. But then a lot of the guys don't even know how to collect that data. They've never been trained on it. They're just installers. And so it's so important, that people have an understanding that there's a right way to do things. And that way of getting it done right, it takes time. It can't be just thrown in and done in one day. It's not a one day, I'm in and out and gone to the next job, So we need to do something more to help educate, our communities. I call a lot of the people that I network with in the HVAC industry, and I'm always talking to them about what I'm doing. They reach out. I offer training at our facility for airflow and duct design. But I tell them, I understand it and I'm learning daily, but and every home is different, but there has to be a push to help educate and get it known of what it's doing to people and how it's damaging homes.
Thank you for sharing all of that. That's so much very important information. It is a little disappointing, though, to hear that these bigger entities this isn't something that they're providing as part of their training. And the comment you made, they're just installers. That just makes me shake my head, because the installer should, look at the paperwork that comes with the equipment and understand it and follow what the guidelines that are in there as they're making these installations. And it is a little disheartening to know that none of that is taking place.
The problem too, though, is that a lot of these new construction companies, they use subcontractors, right? And so these guys get paid by the piece, they get paid by the duct run, and so their job is to get in as fast as they can. There's some companies now that have been involved in litigation and stuff, and they're starting to realize that they've got to take more time. But it starts with the builder. I think the builder has to have some type of accountability, right? They're the ones that are I feel like it's profit over people's health, and they're building and they're mass producing homes, and it's how fast can we get it done? How cheap can we get it done and move on to the next one? And it seems to me like that's where a lot of the issue lies, right? And I've talked to builders, and I did a webinar with some builders, and I said, spend a little bit of extra money, find guys that are doing this testing, these startups, and I've told the builders, like, I wouldn't pay a HVAC contractor, their last check until they provided that startup list. for two reasons. One, it verifies that even if they pencil whipped it, at least you have data. And now when there's an issue or a challenge with that home, now you can go to them and say, well, you've provided this paperwork that said you did a proper startup on it. And now we have this other data proving that you didn't do it, or, and now it takes the liability and the responsibility kind of off the builder and it puts it back on the contractor, right? And the other reason is I feel like that it, with the builders, they, it's all about, I just feel like they want to get that signed contract, and then they make a lot of promises like, yeah, we're going to get this address and all that. But then once they get that contract, I see how the process slows way down, and it's not as an important, because now they're on to building another house or trying to sell another one, So, I don't know if that's just what I see a lot of,
I think, yeah.
You're talking about something that kind of it's one of the things that I speak about a lot to other people. And I had this conversation yesterday with someone because they were like, what do you think needs to change in this industry, Emily? I was like, well, what, if you think about it, it's really crazy how general contractors that are home builders in our state aren't required to even have a license. So they can't have a license taken away and not build homes in Texas anymore if they are continually found out to be building like crappy homes. They also don't have to carry liability insurance like you do. As a HVAC contractor, you also have to be licensed. You have to qualify to get that license. You have to keep up with continuing education. But the people that are building our homes don't have to have a license. They don't have to carry any insurance to cover, any damages or defects, in their homes that are causing people problems. And I just think that's crazy and very backwards. And then in addition to that, it's very insulting whenever the person who's signing that contract to have that builder build them a home find out that they can't take them to court and have a jury of their peers decide who's right and who's wrong and what those damages are. Instead, they find out they have an arbitration clause and they have to go through this long arbitration process. And who has years to go through that whenever they can't even live in their house because of what's going on? And so they have to pay for 2 homes in order to even go through that process.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot. I see that happen a lot with homeowners. And I feel like there has to be change, right? And I think I say this, it's going to happen to the wrong person or the right person, right? It's going to have to be a politician or somebody that's going to help us change some laws, right? Whether we have to lobby to get something done, but contractors have to be held accountable for how they're building, right? And I feel like it's putting so many people in bad situations that they're ruining their credit. They're having to pay a mortgage and live in a hotel because their home is so contaminated or unhealthy for them to be in. We've seen brand new builds with some deficiencies from not having the proper vapor barrier or just moisture coming through weep holes that weren't that weren't done right or filled in with concrete or brick mortar. And so we're seeing where, baseboards in bedrooms are completely, full of mold behind them, and people are getting sick. And these are homes that are 6 months old, 8 months old, and not understanding what's happening. But there is no accountability. And in our industry, HVAC contractors carry insurance, and I've been on a couple of cases right now where they did not provide a manual J, S, or D. I went out and did forensics on it, sent it to the state. The homeowner filed a violation on TDLR and uploaded our report to them. The state reaches out to me and asking me like, well, we're going to reach out to that HVAC contractor and see if they can provide a manual J, S, and D, which is the law. 2017 is when it went into effect that every job had to have that. And so the TDLR calls me back, says, well, they can't provide it. They didn't do it. And but this is their first offense. We're not going to fine them. I said, well, they've ruined this homeowner's home. They built this dream home. They've been in it a year and a half. Their daughter and the wife is sick. They're still fighting. It's been almost 4 years now. And the insurance, they went after the insurance of the HVAC contractor, and the insurance is like, well, we don't cover design flaws. So if we created mold, if the HVAC contractor, the main drain line stopped up and it overflowed and it damaged the ceiling and it caused mold from that, then yes, we would take care of that stuff. But if it created mold because of a design or lack of design, challenge or issue, we don't cover that. So the insurance, they couldn't go after the insurance for that, so I feel like it's, homeowners really are on their own when it comes to having to go after things. And if you don't have deep pockets, there's no way you're gonna go up against the builder, because they have legal team on staff. They can, fight it for years. I know lawyers right now that are working on cases that have been going at it 5 years and still working on it, on these cases, so they just try to make you run out of money, before, if you're trying. And I tell people, if you're gonna do it, you're doing it based off of principle, because it's gonna take a long time, you got the money to spend, but it's almost a no-win situation, I don't know very many people that walk away as a winner, because you paid all the lawyers, I think, are the ones that win in the situation.
Yeah, so really the best thing that anybody can do is just to educate themselves and empower themselves when it comes, especially if you're trying to buy a house, and just know everything that you possibly can before you walk into that situation, because all of these production builders have these arbitration clauses. You might find some smaller boutique builders that will allow you to draft a new contract with your attorney, but usually the production builders aren't going to do that. And so you have to be prepared to really pick up the slack. And it's not fair. If you're buying a new house, you should not have to do that. You should have an expectation that your builder is going to correct deficiencies and do the right thing. And it really almost feels like the whole warranty thing is a sham, because you're not actually getting the protection that you think you're getting by having that warranty. So this kind of information is just critical for anybody that's looking to buy a new construction home. Have this in your back pocket, understand what you might be faced with, and do you have the capacity to hire somebody, a third party, to come in and check these things for you, and also make repairs as necessary, because the builder may not cooperate because there really isn't a power that's going to hold them accountable, not currently the way we really need it in the state of Texas.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the other thing too is that a lot of homeowners rely on just their home inspection, and that's a very vague. Home inspectors, I mean, they're not professional. I say they're not experts in everything, right? But not that they're not professionals, but they're not experts in everything, and so they have a lot of clauses like, well, there's a little bit of moisture or rust or corrosion in the drain pan, they refer to the HVAC guy. Or we don't have a proper temperature drop, they contact an HVAC contractor. So I tell people all the time, like, a home inspector is not going to catch a lot of this. And that's the first thing they say. Well, I just bought this home. This home's, I got my home inspection report, and then they email it to me, and I start looking at it, and it's just like everything's referred back. Well, call a plumber, call an electrician, have a licensed HVAC contractor come out and look at it. So I tell homeowners all the time, I mean, if you're going to invest in something that you're going to be living in for the next few years, 10 years, or if it's your final home, I mean, hire professionals that understand, that can actually provide data, capture data, and give you a good insight of what it's going to do to help get that house healthy and to maintain a healthy home, so don't just rely on your home inspector's report, because just like contractors, builders, they have a lot of clauses that keep them out of trouble too, or keep them from being liable.
Right. So the checklist that we need homeowners to look at is not just your regular home inspector, but get yourself an HVAC contractor, third party, someone like yourself, get a roof inspection, get as many different people as you can. I like to tell people it's kind of like you have your primary care doctor. They're good for kind of helping to determine if you have something going on, but maybe you need an oncologist, maybe you need a podiatrist, maybe you need a gastroenterologist. There's all these other things that you may need to look at. And so I just think I'm 100% hire that third-party HVAC contractor, because that's one of the biggest areas that you can have a failure in your home.
Yeah, and it's the most important part of the, I tell people, and we use that phrase, like it's the lungs of the home. And if that's not healthy or that's not right, then the people inside are going to be right or healthy. And so, and there's a lot of good content on social media that people put, about the importance of having an HVAC inspection, and, where the dust and debris and dirt and moist, like just they have a lot of good information out there now. And mold inspectors, mold consultants are starting to talk more about the HVAC being a big concern for homes. And I feel like I've been pretty fortunate that I get a lot of good feedback from homeowners after we do stuff, and just how immediately they can tell a difference from having a properly installed HVAC system designed, installed, set up, started, and then just, now it's, they can tell a difference. And I get a lot of calls and feedback and emails. Like we can tell, thank you for getting our homes healthy. And, and it's very rewarding. And I love that part of the business. And I tell people all the time, like, what I'm doing now, it's so rewarding. But I like the challenge of understanding everybody's home on a different level. And it's not a cookie cutter type deal. It takes understanding a lot of things. And that's why we talked about earlier, the manual J, the manual S, the manual D, everything is so important to making sure that you have that it's for that home and how it's set up, and I tell people too, like, understanding when you start making improvements on your home, not just low-lying fruit stuff, but like putting caulking or stuff like that. But when you start changing windows, when you start adding attic insulation, or if you're thinking about foaming a home, you have to consult an HVAC contractor, because now you're changing the load of the house. Now you're changing what needs, the size of the unit, and so you can't just start making these improvements and not realizing that you're affecting how the home's going to perform. Now you might be tightening the home up more, and doing these improvements, doing air seal of the attic, and R38 attic insulation, all of that, R8 ductwork, whatever you do, you need to make sure that it fits within the manual J, S, and D for design. And we've seen homeowners do that, and then next thing they know, that they have a lot of mold issues or high humidity. Well, they just replaced all the windows. They, air sealed their attic, and now their systems are just short cycling. They run for 5 or 10 minutes, shut off, and they don't run long enough to dehumidify and dry out the home. And so, it might be as simple as adding some dehumidifiers, whether you do your portables from, local retail or big box stores, or you do a whole home in professional contractors dehumidifier installed for the whole home, so there's a lot of things that you have to be mindful of as a homeowner, and when you start doing and making improvements for your home.
I love that you touched on that, because we actually that was one of the big issues for a lot of people, is like we started getting sick, and one of the things that they did was they added on to their home, and they never took in consideration what you just went over. And so when that occurred, that started to cause condensation, moisture problems, humidity issues, then mold started to grow, and then bam, people started to get sick.
Yeah, and I see that a lot, and I thank God for the lot of years of experience and just the clientele that I've been able to work with, and I learned a lot from that. And as I tell people, it's so fun to do what I do, because we go in there, and then we have to start asking the questions and start looking around. Okay, well, when did you get these? And then it's all of a sudden we start understanding when all of these changes started happening. And it's very interesting. Like it's you have to be on your toes, and you have to just know what to do. And then once we start figuring out those things, now we find out solutions on how we can correct that and how we can get it healthy and get it right again. And that's the part I love, because we have the team that understands it, that can size it. And one of the things that I didn't touch on earlier, but our whole team is invested in this, from our service techs to our installers. They carry the credentials that I have, they all have for airflow, duct design, Everything that we do a lot of training weekly and at our company. And I think that's what separates our installers and their employees. They're not just subs. I mean, they're part of our team. And we get a lot of great feedback from homeowners saying, your team, well, we asked, this guy at this process, what y'all were doing, and they had an answer for us. Like we've had work before from whether it was other contracting and nobody knows nothing. They were like, oh, we call the boss or call the owner. They know we're just here doing what we're told. But like every job that we do, we have a meeting before that job and we lay it out. We have the drawings, we have everything's highlighted so that but everybody understands what's about to happen. And it's communication. And that way we had to put processes in place. And I tell people, like, we're a process driven company. And I started realizing and understanding the importance of having the processes down right. If you look at like McDonald's, right? I mean, you can go to any McDonald's or any fast food chain restaurant and the food tastes the same. It don't matter if you're in Texas, Florida, California, but they have a process on how to do that. Prepare, whether you're making a salad, whether you're making a hamburger, cheeseburger, whatever the case may be. And so because it's a process and they know exactly how many pickles and how, well, I tell people same thing with us. Like, we're process driven. We have steps on how to do things the right way, how to hang and support the ductwork, the radius of the ductwork, placement on the plenum. There's just so much behind the scenes that we have a process, written out so that everybody's on the same page and we're all speaking the same language. And I think that's what truly separates us from everybody else. But our team has a passion to want to help now. Like, everybody's on board and they love what they do. And we just did a house this past weekend, and the homeowner sent me an email saying, this was the most professional team. We've had other HVAC stuff done, but your guys seem to really, truly love what they do, and, he just couldn't say enough good things about them. And then same thing, like just how the air hasn't immediately that night, they could tell a difference in the indoor air quality. But I tell people it's how I envisioned it, and I prayed that I would have a company that would do this. And I think that, from all the long nights and a lot of hours of figuring things out and having some good key people on our team that helped out and getting us on this path is why we are where we are today and why we're doing what we're doing. And I thank God for this opportunity and the ability that it's a gift that he's given me, and it's my calling. And I tell people that all the time, like, I truly was created, I found my calling, and it was to, be the HVAC guy, the design guy, the one that can help figure things out. And I'm, very thankful that I'm able to do this on a daily basis.
Yeah, we're thankful too. It's definitely very comforting being in Texas and knowing that there actually is an HVAC company that isn't going to gaslight people, that is going to address this type of issue head on and really find those facts and provide the research and data that we as homeowners really need to make informed decisions that are going to have longevity, right? Because nobody wants to buy an AC system and then 2 years later find out that the whole thing has failed and created a bigger problem. So it's wonderful. And I hope that we will see more companies taking this lead in the future so that we can have healthier homes just across the country. It's so badly needed.
Yeah, I agree. And you're right. It's everywhere. It's not just in Houston or, Texas area. It's, Louisiana, Atlanta, Florida. I mean, I get calls from people all over, and just hearing their stories and wishing that they could find somebody that would take on a project. Or, last year I did quite a bit of traveling and, and going to these states and working with other contractors to help figure out and get these homes fixed. But yeah, there needs to be more of us out there. And I feel like, it's going to take education. It's going to take an understanding of our industry is going to have to wake up and start realizing like the importance of it. We can't have just moving boxes, right? It has to be, because I tell people all the time, like, you know, we talk about taxing the grid, and the Department of Energy and everybody wants to push very high efficiency equipment, right? But if you don't have the airflow right, I can't tell you how many 16 SEER, 18 SEER, 22 SEER systems that we've gone and looked at, 20 plus, and then they have very bad duct design on it, and it's not operating any better than a 12 SEER system, like if it's not installed correctly, you don't have the airflow right and have the proper duct design, that system's not going to be any better than just a standard system. And I tell people, I see it on a daily basis. I've got videos, photos, I've got hard data to prove that, and so air is the most important part of the system, and duct design and airflow. And, I'm getting the message out there, and I'm working with other guys and builders, and people are starting to understand, but I feel like I haven't even really scratched the surface yet. Like we have to get more involved in educating people and working with companies and helping them improve and get better with what they do.
Brian, you are a blessing, and you are changing lives. And we thank you so much for coming on here and doing this podcast today to continue to spread the education and the message that people need to wake up and start learning about all this.
No, thank y'all. Thank y'all for having me on. And I look forward to, just to keep working and networking with the mold community and doing my part on what we can do to help, help families and getting homes healthy again, so that people can get back to living comfortably and having, peace of mind. And that's what I hope that Crossway brings to the table is, when we leave. And one thing that I will say that I have learned a lot from the mold community is that people that have PTSD or people that have been victims of mold, they are the most, I would say they're so big on maintenance, and they're so big about making sure that everything is functioning and working correctly. Like, they take care of their home, and they appreciate their home so much more after going through that. And that's what I tell people. It's the residual, the repeat business that you will get when you find clients that have been victims. They want it maintained. I have customers now that want every quarter for us to come. They don't want a biannual service. They want it every quarter. They want to do everything they can to mitigate any chances of having, something go wrong with their home. And the HVAC is where their main concern lies, that or water heaters or, underneath sinks. But they're doing their part. And so, and our service department, our service team, like, those guys have really truly bought in now. Like, they're saying, like, the customers are calling, like, oh, I just want, Luis back out here, or I want Jose, whoever went out there, because they found that person that cares about doing the proper maintenance, providing the data, providing photos, showing them that everything is still working and functioning the way it's supposed to. And we have data to back that up on every call that we go on. So, and so we tell people, like, we're keeping track. We have the data, and we also leave them, that information so that they can always go back and review it. So, but it's an amazing journey. And like I said, I'm thankful for people like, your husband, Josh, who's out there doing, the inspections, and Miriam, who's, working with customers and clients trying to buy homes. And so, we're all utilizing our talents and utilizing our gifts to help others and to educate. And education is the most important part of it, and I learned that from a member of Malachi's message. Christina's really big about talking about educating yourself as a homeowner. And even for me as a professional, as a contractor, I realized, like, I've done a lot of that, and I'm still continuing to educate myself. I'm not just because this new product that's out, I'm just going to start selling it. No, I want to test it. I want to educate myself on it. I want to make sure before, I put it out there, and that's one thing, just networking with the team of people that I have met. There's a lot of us that want to understand how that product is before we endorse it, or before we start just recommending and put it in homes.
Yeah, that's all excellent. I want to touch on something that you said about how homeowners, once they go through the PTSD, the tragedy, we take that tragedy and we use it to become the best homeowners ever, the best tenants ever, because we want to keep our home safe and provide the best maintenance and stay on top of things. You know, we become the most responsible people. And my hope is that in the future, builders will also want to become the most responsible builders, to not have to spend money on litigation because you're going into this arbitration situation that's going to carry on for years and years because they simply didn't do the right things the first time around, hiring the right people, taking their time with all of this. It really just makes all the sense in the world. Hire the right company, have the right data and research, and you're protecting yourself. And so it's kind of ironic that the building industry doesn't take that approach, because they would save so much money on legal fees and hiring contractors to come back in to fix and repair. And so what you are doing is making a difference. Every member of your team is making a difference by taking an interest in this. Even though y'all have not been personally impacted by mold, you see day in and day out what is happening with your clients, and you have compassion, and you're using that to turn around. And it's just like a fuel, it sounds like, to keep researching and doing bigger and better things for the community. So thank you so much for
Yes.
doing that.
No, thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and we'll have more conversations with you in the future, because I feel like there's so many questions regarding the HVAC that we would want to touch base again. So thank you so much for joining us today.